All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Mark Dohnalek, and he is the CEO of Pivot International, and he's going to talk to us today about product design, development, manufacturing. We're going to talk all engineering and markets. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
So why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and, that journey. How did you get over to Pivot International? What really made this a good fit?
So I've been at this for a while. I was in a corporate world job at various levels for the first 15, 18 years of my career in engineering, finance, business, really a combination of things. And about 20 years ago, I acquired my first business, ran that for about 10 years, a more technical kind of product design manufacturing firm in a particular industry. And then in 2008, it was acquired by someone, by a larger firm, and knew that wasn't my last journey in life. So I looked around for kind of a business that was kind of oriented to what I was around: technical products, innovative products, design, manufacturing type businesses and came across Pivot International, and about 10 years ago, I acquired that and been running it ever since. One thing I liked about Pivot at the time, the platform of the organization, even before what we've done since then, had a global footprint from a design, engineering, and manufacturing standpoint. So I knew there was a lot to work with there.
So can you tell everyone a little bit about what Pivot International does?
Yeah, we're a product design and manufacturing services firm. So a company approaches us, or a startup or an entrepreneur. We do business with the startup people and the big corporations. They have a need for a solution, a product solution of some kind. And we will take that conversation from point A and design it and put in prototype design, then design for manufacturing, and then a manufacturing solution. And we're a one-stop shop in that regard. Whereas this space, this contract services space, you've heard a lot about contract manufacturing. Of course, there's engineering firms. Often they go for the product design. A lot of times they go for the prototype design. Then they have to find another firm that will make that for manufacturing, lower costs, manufacturability, those kinds of things. And then they go looking for a contract manufacturer. We're all that in one, basically.
So then who's in your mind, who's your ideal customer?
Ideal customer is probably a middle market company. We do a lot of $1 billion clients as well, but they generally, you would think, would have what we have, but because we have some niche technologies that we're pretty good at, that's why we still find ourselves doing business with some of the $1 billion guys. But our primary profile is middle market, a couple $100 million, $20 million to $200 million business that does not have the scale, may not have the engineering, may not have the manufacturing options. So that's probably our primary. And embedded electronics, if you think of your phone, it's electronics in a box, really. And that's kind of what we do. And we do a lot of mechanical things as well. But our primary core competency is integral electrical engineering design with mechanical engineering along with that.
Now, Pivot does touch a lot of different markets. So one of the things we were wondering, is, we were talking a little bit about this off camera, but with the pandemic, have you seen any markets kind of pick up a little bit more in your opinion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If you think about the stay-at-home products you've heard in the air, big time. I mean, they're off the charts. I mean, everything from fitness to bicycles to workout, other workouts, products that you can do at your home. We have a business where we have a high-speed hobby race car industry. These cars go like 160 miles an hour that we have motor control technologies for. And it's a whole new little shadow kind of world of these hobby race car people. And that business is triple its size because people are home, so-called remote working, but maybe they're racing the race cars every once in a month.
So they're working all right, Mark.
Exactly. Try buying a bicycle in the sporting goods place. They're not around. All kinds of these examples. We're big in the fitness industry as well. So we do a lot of embedded electronics, those streaming new devices that are so hot, treadmills. We have a lot of the technology in place in some of those. So we do a lot of work in that area, and that's really strong as well. So those are some real strengths we've seen. Obviously, in the core industry, general economy, that's down for sure. But we've been fortunate. All our business units have been critical and essential deemed. So we've kept our business in all facets operating, where in the other case, some people get shut down because of during that period where they were shutting things down.
Right. Do you see with electronics, especially in the fitness area, do you see that bleeding over eventually into just sort of like some of the medical stuff that's going on, like where, you know,
Oh,
you may do
absolutely.
like rehab
Yeah.
and things like that at home?
Absolutely. You can already see a form of it's already happening because some of the analytics is being done for some of the technologies as you're in that treadmill or cycle. And as you hold something and the devices you can have with that provides heartbeat, cholesterol, all kinds of analytics. So I think there's no question it's going to happen, but it's already kind of happening as we speak.
Are there any other markets that you're seeing that we might expect to pick up that we maybe didn't think of? Like anything that's going on right now that maybe we should start thinking about?
Well, I think anything that provides AI technology that makes flexible work more realistic, I think is going to have some really growth pathways. And I think with this remote 1 year experiment, I'm not of the believer that it's never going back to people aren't going to go back to office. I think they are, but there's probably a 10 or so percent of the people that won't probably go back. But I think what has changed is the flexibility of work. So let's say you're in the office, but one day you need to stay at home because of whatever. That's no longer a vacation day because you had to just take a vacation day. There could be remote working now because of all the infrastructures in place. And I think innovation associated with making it better, because we've all kind of worked through all this. It's not perfect. It's got a lot of room of growth, bandwidth investment, so the tools can be better and more clear. I mean, there's a lot of, I think that's going to be a area that continues to grow. So, you know, companies like Roku and those kinds of companies are going to continue to prosper because they drive that data, you know, over the lines.
Do you think too we're going to see, because you mentioned the electronics and the mechanical, right? Do you think we're going to see a bigger influx of things in robotics or robotic type things where, you know, you have a lot of that, especially with remoteness?
Right.
You know,
I think that's true. I think as you get the intermixing of politics as well about various things, that will encourage even more innovation of technology to mitigate some of those things, like some of the small businesses and things like that. And I think I think that's going to, and it's been a continued trend. If you think about when you walk into some restaurants now, you're touching an iPad to order and you're doing all that. And there's not a person waiting on you. You're ordering your food, you're waiting, you're getting your ticket, and they're giving you your food. So I think that's already kind of was trending anyway prior to this pandemic. I think it'll intensify. I think I really do, for better or for worse.
Well, have you noticed a certain set of challenges that your customers are experiencing over the past year that are different from maybe pre-pandemic? Are they experiencing some new challenges?
Two in particular. One is the fact is if you have products to manufacture in the United States, it's difficult to find people to work in the plants. We're personally going through that in 3 different places where, you know, we're doing all kinds of things to try and encourage people to. It's a clean environment. It's light assembly. It's air conditioned. It's so it's a good environment. Electronics manufacturing really is a pretty solid environment. Difficult to find people, so that's happening. And then the supply chain impact of the pandemic is huge. Lead times, port facilities, cost increases, availability, all across the board is a major challenge right now. And that's been driven more about the demand because of the embedded electronic demand because of what we're doing right now, remote communicating. So there's more laptops being manufactured. There's more glass being bought for the laptops. You know, it just kind of explodes. And that's taken the bandwidth. You know, the U.S. car makers shut down 4 plants that we read about 2 weeks ago because of memory chips. And then Biden came out with a executive order to try and help that out just a week or 2 ago. So that's definitely a big challenge right now. Now, I don't think that's a long-term challenge. I think it will get solved, but there's a time problem. There's a timing issue for sure.
Do you think we're going to see any other timing issues around any type of components or materials, you know, that haven't yet come to light for us yet?
I suspect there will be because of the global plant shutdown effect that the pandemic had. And when that demand draws up, they're not going to run ahead of the demand. So demand's going to come in. It's going to cause shutdowns or stoppages or delays because of component releases. And it's going to take 12 to 24 months probably to cleanse all that out. I think it takes a long time to put wafers, which make these chips. It took a long time to get those new plants online. And some of them never reopened from the financial crisis either, quite frankly, because we really had kind of a modest recovery for many years until maybe the last 12 months before the pandemic. And so they never brought a lot of capacity back online anyway. And now there's been this absolute surge. I mean, it's quite amazing.
Do you think too, in terms of like the logistics of it all, that people are going to use different manufacturing, like those facilities in different parts of the world now, and not so much, have it all in one area just to keep it a little more diverse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Even things that they didn't even think about, they found out that maybe having our F-35 chips made in China is maybe the best idea in the world, for example. So they're not just multifaceted supply chain sources. That's for sure going to happen. I don't think there's any question about that. But even these kind of sensitive areas that it just kind of happened over a 25-year period gradually, and people really just didn't think about it. I mean, I was once in the medical device industry, employed as a big. We were at the time. This was like 8 years ago. I worked there for 10 years. It's we were 90% of the market share of ventilatory medicine. All the ventilators in the world were made by the company I worked for at the time, and I had been out of that business for years. And when the pandemic hit, what we heard about, all the ventilators were being made in China. Well, they used to be made in Carlsbad, California, for 90% of the world. So when I was involved in it, so those medical supplies as well are going to be greatly scrutinized, I think, for. Does it make sense? Where's our overlapping supply chain? I think that's a forever change there that's come out of this for sure.
Yeah. Mark, your Pivot, actually, one of the services you guys touch on is supply chain services, correct? So how does that fit into the operation, and how do you assist in that way?
Well, it's so part of what we do as a company. As we design these products and they move them into manufacturing, we have a global supply chain that sources all the components for these products that are being made in Asia or United States, whatever. And because not everybody has that, and it's particularly applicable for the middle market I talked about, and obviously smaller companies as well than that people just don't have boots on the ground around the world. They don't have the resources that we have, the technical and supply chain, because we have an engineering design office in Taiwan as well as headquartered in Kansas City and another engineering office in St. Louis. So having that resource, that boots on the ground resource, because a lot of these embedded electronics do come from Asia/China, no matter where we buy them from locally, they originate out of that. That's where maybe in time, maybe they won't, but right now they still do. And they will for many years to come because that whole infrastructure is in place, like the chips, for instance. So that service is an available service that people could use us, and we could help them source their products for better components. Mainly it would be components for their manufacturing. We could definitely help in that area.
Brian, you looked like you were going to say something. That's
no. I was just processing.
You always have supply chain questions. Brian.
I sort of asked them right before this.
I know, that's true. Well, I'm trying to think in terms of the engineer, right? We're talking to engineers, and so when is a good time? What should they know? Is it the engineer? And this is, really from my own knowledge. Is it the engineer who's coming to you? Is it the company? Is it some other?
Sure. Generally speaking, it's a senior level person because this is a very strategic decision. So we do get a number of engineers that do come to us for sure in large organizations that have a need that can't quite They find us because they know we have a niche that they maybe lack. So we can provide. So that would be an example where we would deal with directly on the first engagement with an engineer right from the start. That does happen probably a third of the time. But for the most part, it's a strategic decision. And so it's a senior, if it's a large corporation, it's a senior level person for sure. If it's a small or medium company, it's probably the CEO or a partner or a very high level person. Because if you think about what people do is, okay, we have this product, we're marketing, we're going to outsource the engineering, outsource the manufacturing. They got to have a lot of confidence in us because that's a very big decision. And but it does happen through engineering. Often the second meeting is with engineers, and then that's where we have to validate our expertise to their technical team. So the first meeting might be a marketing, product development executive, owner, vice president. Then right away there's a meeting with a pretty large scale involved conversation about our capabilities, and that's they'll have their technical team in on that for sure.
Right. How does that process off? Is it a smooth process working with the engineers and your team? I mean, are they involved every step of the way? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, we lay out the plan. Like we define what they're trying to do, what the widget's supposed to do, what the performance criteria. A lot of these people don't have it all documented. We have to many times work with them to provide the proper technical documentation. You do that by interviewing, by engagement, by having meetings about what's this device supposed to do, and where's it going to be at, what's the environment it's in, what kind of issues could you have. They have to go through all of that many times to help the documentation be put in place to properly do the job. Once we do that, then we go through a very detailed development schedule, very detailed about dates and by week and who's on what and how much engineering is going to be involved and what the timeline is. Usually it takes 12 to 18 months. We also will tell people 9 to 12 we can get there, because everyone's usually 12 to 18 is not normally, people don't think that far ahead. So often the reality is that what it should take, and that's usually what it should take. But the marketplace pushes it to tend to be a 9 to 12 cycle, and there's 3 months of its tooling. So if you think about that, you've only got a 6-month development cycle. It's 9 months. So because the tooling is a third of the time. Just the way it kind of is. So it's so we go through all of that, and we try to, and then what's the testing environment? How should we test this product before we release it for delivery? And a lot of times people underestimate the importance of that last step, and that's probably one of the most important areas of the whole process.
So you mentioned some of that time gets shortened, right, to a 9 or 12 month cycle. So do you wind up having to, if the client wants that, right, if it's on a 12 to 16, where you're sort of, I don't want to say modifying the design, but especially due to not being able to get some components, swapping out components throughout the process a lot, just because they're shortening the time frame?
Yeah, a lot of times that can happen. We were able to avoid that, but what really is at risk is proper process overlap protocol design process. In other words, doing testing once you do a first cut of the plastics, let's say, as an example, to make sure that, and then you get pushed to maybe skip one of the testing steps. Well, then you raise your risk up another level. And yeah, certainly right now, that supply chain component issue hasn't really been a problem prior, but we're seeing it now because it's an extraordinary situation with the lead times, and that's where it's changed. Prior to that, we knew far enough ahead, we would plan ahead, but because these lead times are being stretched unplanned and unannounced, that you're caught off guard. So that definitely could be the future for sure. But the real risk when you push too far ahead on the front end of the schedule, like he needs this in 8 months kind of a thing. Now you're being asked to skip some steps that the reason why they're there is to create a good quality product.
Absolutely.
So you're kind of jeopardizing some oversight. And so you have to be real careful. What you do kind of, streamline can still be a proper validation process of the product design process.
And do you advise them otherwise when they want to do that?
Yeah, we
you
do.
tell
We say, no, we really need that. No, we need it. We can,
Yeah.
so we can cut maybe 2 weeks here and a week here, but we
Right.
need to do this and we need to do that. And a lot of times they listen, but sometimes they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. When they start asking you to cut the project in half time wise, yeah, that's
Yeah,
not
right, exactly. And then my business is going to go out of business if I don't have a product next year. So,
exactly.
so
Exactly.
you get all this empathy stuff going on too. So, and you try and be a good partner with them. Sometimes we should have been tougher on them, to be honest, because it didn't turn out well. And you learn these things. But if you get too rigid, then they think you're not flexible and
Right.
willing to work with them. So it's
Yes.
not a hot, cold water thing. It's
Right.
it's a little gray at
Yeah.
times when you're trying to work with customers, be pro customer. Because a lot of people in our industry are rigid and they're not flexible. And so, and we try to be more entrepreneurial than that.
Yeah. And let's be honest, every business needs to be flexible in what they're doing. It's just it's the way you get things done. You got to be flexible.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
There's more than one way to do things,
Exactly.
Yeah. Like for instance, we're coming out with a pool skimmer, pool cleaner. It's like the Rumba of pool cleaners. So it goes over the top. It's solar powered, completely solar powered, and it cleans the stuff off the top of the pool. And they got some. They need to have the product delivered in March because it's a short season. Because summertime they want to be in the pool. So we had to do a little bit of this slipping and sliding on the schedule to help them on that stuff.
Yeah.
Look at that summer reference you got there, Mark.
What's that?
That summer reference to the slip and slide.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, I guess, products that are seasonal, right? Like if you don't make the season, right, you're not doing it to the next year,
Yeah. Then you wait another year. Nobody in Ohio wants a pool cleaner, in December. It's not a very popular time. They may need an ice scraper
under the tree,
Yeah, exactly. Indeed.
So, Mark, why don't you give us some advice? What would you say to like you mentioned, a CEO or a high-level executive or an engineer, anybody who is coming to work with you for the first time, who's interested in product development? What would you advise them before speaking to you or any company like you?
I think they should be thinking further ahead, and I think they should and take their time about defining what they're looking to have done as far as the product they're interested in, and taking more time than normal of understanding where it's going to be at and what's the kind of environment it's going to be in, so that once they have products out in the field, they perform well and they don't have the kind of product returns that so often happen. You just take a little time at really taking and going through that methodically themselves, because they're still going to always know the product more than we are, and the industry more than we are. We're not their industry experts, and often they sometimes think we are, but they're still going to know more about their specific environment than we're going to know. We can get dialed up on it and get educated and all these kinds of things, but we're not going to have the experience they're going to have. So taking a fair amount of time, really thinking that through before you talk to anybody, whether it's Pivot or someone else, because then you're going to get a quicker development process. You will, because what happens in reality is that you have a lot of start and stops, and so you end up missing the schedule anyway. So if they put a little investment in their own time, then you get a lot better things on the back end, and then of course it's going to perform better. But you're going to more likely stick to your schedule. It's a better chance of that happening.
Well, Mark, can you let everybody know where they can learn more about you and Pivot International and how they can come work with you?
Sure, you can go out to our website at www.pivotint.com. That's www.pivotint.com, and we can be reached, and we would love to talk to people about new ideas they have, new solutions, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.